Aar Meher Baba ki jai. So we'll start with the universal prayer and we'll rotate between three of us. Uh, Ka- Ashokji, you can start with the universal prayer. Mamaji, do the repentance. And Kama, if you're okay, you can do the beloved God. Let's start. Ashokji,
Avatar
Meher Baba ki jai.
made of Gije, universal prayer. O Parvardigar, preserver and protector of all, you are without beginning and without end, non-dual, beyond comparison, and none can measure you. You are without color, without expression, without form, and without attributes. You are unlimited and unfathomable, beyond imagination and
Imagination.
conception, eternal and imperishable. You are indivisible, and none can see you, but with eyes divine, you always were, you always are, and you always will be. You are everywhere, you are in everything, and you are also beyond everywhere
Beyond, beyond,
and
beyond.
beyond everything. You are in the firmament and in the depths. You are manifest and unmanifest on all planes and beyond all planes. You are in the three worlds and beyond the three worlds. You are imperceptible and independent. You are the creator, the Lord of Lords, the knower of all minds and hearts. You are omnipotent and omnipresent. You are knowledge infinite, power infinite, and bliss infinite. You are the ocean of knowledge, all knowing, infinitely knowing, the knower of the past, the present, and the future, and you are knowledge itself. You are all merciful and eternally benevolent. You are the soul of souls, the one with infinite attributes. You are the trinity of truth, knowledge, and bliss. You are the source of truth, the ocean of love. You are the ancient one, the highest of the high. You are Prabhu and Parmeshwar. You are the beyond God and the beyond God also. You are Parabrahma, Allah, Ilahi, Yazdan, Ahurmaz, and God the Beloved. Your name Jesus, the only one worthy of worship. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai.
Avatar Meher Baba ki Jai, the prayer of repentance. This prayer was dictated by Meher Baba in 1952. We repent, O God most merciful, for all our sins, for every thought that was false or unjust or unclean, for every word spoken that ought not to have been spoken, for every deed done that ought not to have been done. We repent for every deed and word and thought inspired by selfishness, and for every deed and word and thought inspired by hatred. We repent especially for every lustful thought and every lustful action, for every lie, for all hypocrisy, for every promise given but not fulfilled, and for all slander and backbiting. Most especially also we repent for every action that brought ruins to others, for every word and deed that has given others pain, and for every wish that pain should befall others. In your unbounded mercy, we ask you to forgive us, O God, for all these sins committed by us, and to forgive us for our constant failures to think and speak and act according to your will. Avatar Meher Baba ki Jai.
Beloved God, Help us all to love you more and more and more and more and still yet more till we become worthy of union with you, and help us all to hold fast to Baba's Daman till the very end. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. Okay, so welcome back to our session on God Speaks. In a very nice coincidence, we read about the 7 stages of waking very briefly in our discussion as Baba was providing that illustration. We also went and did more supplementary reading yesterday. So we finished the 5th stage and the 6th stage last time, but we wanted to go back and read the 6th again. But just as context, maybe we will just leaf through the first two the stages again from the beginning. By the way, I did try to visualize this. I spent about half an hour reading this and trying to somehow structure it, and then I got consumed by something else and I left. But this is really something we should put together. I think this deserves some deeper thought and notes, basically. And when I'm saying visualize, I'm saying some sort of notes. Anyway, so let's just see what this is. So the keywords here in the first stage are completely unconscious. So both God and the man state there is complete absence of consciousness. And in both states, Baba says there is absolute vacuum. Okay. So maybe we should underline these words as we are seeing them. So in the is divine sound sleep. And yeah, there's complete absence of consciousness. And yeah, so from the physical perspective, there is a shut eyes. Okay. I think the first one is the easiest, right? So second, you go, yeah.
Baba, you mentioned completely unconscious on top.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
is left out.
Yes, that's a good.
Like,
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And then now let's go to the second stage.
Baba,
Eyes.
yeah,
Yeah, Kama.
yeah, there is one input of my understanding that the difference is that when the human being is in sound sleep state, there is
Hmm?
consciousness. When the human being is in sound sleep state, there is the state of consciousness which is unconscious of, because that consciousness unites with the individual consciousness, unites with the universal consciousness. But this is just an analogy, whereas technically speaking, in the first stage, nothing exists, only the real everything, which means it excludes consciousness, unconsciousness, conscious, unconscious, infinite, blah, blah, blah. The only thing is the infinitude God is, which is the divine absolute vacuum state, which it's
Vacuum.
unconscious of. Yeah. Hey, Baba.
So that's our. You're talking about the daily sleep, right? The daily sleep thing. That's. So you're saying consciousness is there, but it's latent every night.
Correct. The
Yeah, exactly.
consciousness is available, it is latent, and only the human being is unconscious of the sound sleep state.
Correct.
And whereas in the stage one of God, or state one of God, the
which we call the beyond state of God, divine absolute vacuum state, consciousness doesn't even exist there.
Yes,
Jai Baba.
correct. So now, I was just going to the second stage. So if you notice, the key things are eyes are very, very slightly open. And another keyword he uses, which is beautiful, is disturbed. Okay, so here disturbed from the sound sleep. Then there is emergence of dormant impressions. So the only impression at this stage is the who am I, the question, right? And now commencing to project through the subconsciousness of the man. Okay, so in everything there is the divine subconsciousness or the divine sound sleep or the man's sound sleep. So if you see in each of the stages, so here it is the subconsciousness of the man, and the dormant impressions are just beginning to project through the subconsciousness of the man. And the physical state is eyes are very, very slightly open, right? And then we go through the varied impressions, begins to experience dreams, okay? Although no longer in sound sleep state, because the absolute vacuum no longer prevails. We can underline this as well. Okay. Yeah. Now the man. So I actually, it's very detailed. If you go in, you have to go in and completely read it from scratch, which I'm fine with. If you want, we can do it from stage one. Do you want to just do that?
Yes. I think it's
I
better
think
you
that's
start from
better.
stage one. It will give us some continuity and flow. Yes.
Context. Yeah, I think that's better. So let me start again. Avtar Meher Baba Ki Jai. First stage. Visualize a man with eyes completely shut and in sound sleep. This man is completely unconscious and is oblivious of all that surrounds him. Now, picture at the same time the original divine sound sleep state of God as he is in the original absolute vacuum of the God is state. In both cases, that is, both in God's formless state and God's state of human form as a man or woman, there is complete absence of consciousness, and in both cases, absolute vacuum prevails. Simultaneously, also picture the total absence of consciousness in both cases as comparable to the completely shut eyes of a man in sound sleep. So, physically, eyes are completely closed, divine absolute vacuum or absolute vacuum in the state of the man. I mean, it even in the state of the man, it's the divine absolute vacuum. It's just that you're not conscious of it, right? And the subtle point Kama just made now is your consciousness is active but latent in the man state, in the man's sound sleep state, right? So that's stage one. Any thoughts before we go to next one? Yeah, like I said, this is the simple one. So let's now go to the second stage. Second stage, visualize the next state of the man as being still asleep, but beginning to open his eyes very, very slightly because he's just bestirred from his sound sleep state and the spell of absolute vacuum is shattered by the emergence of the dormant impressions now commencing to project through the subconsciousness of the man, which also lay latent in him in his sound sleep state. Now, this is the nightly routine of the individual. So the nightly routine, there is already impressions. This is not the this is not God's sleep, right? This is man's sleep. Man's sleep, impressions are already dormant. So the first stage is the emergence of the dormant impressions commencing to project through the subconsciousness of the man, which also lay latent in him in his sound sleep state. So the key word here now is subconsciousness is active. Because of the projection of the varied impressions through the subconsciousness of this man, he now begins to experience dreams while still asleep, although no longer in the sound sleep state because the absolute vacuum no longer prevails. For the man to commence experiencing dreams means that in his initial stage of the semi-conscious state, now this is where I was also struggling. So there's both semi-conscious and subconscious. I repeat this line. For the man to commence experiencing dreams means that in his initial stage of the semi-conscious state, just give me 1 second. I have someone at the door and there's nobody at home. Sorry about that. I repeat, for the man to commence experiencing dreams means that in his initial stage of the semi-conscious state, he begins to experience through his subconsciousness the dormant impressions of the nothingness in the sub-subtle forms. So, my reading, all it is conveying is you're using your subconsciousness, you are experiencing dreams, and when you're experiencing dreams, the same dormant impressions that you had when you were awake are now finding expression through those dreams, and you experience subtle forms. And yeah, I think what is a bit confusing in the verbiage here is the use of subconscious and semi-conscious, both within 3 lines. Okay. But keep that aside for a minute. Let's continue. The man now is not only in the initial stage of the semi-conscious state and is not only beginning to experience dreams, but he is also starting to get involved in the dreams by beginning to associate with the creatures in the subsubtle forms of his own creation. So let's mark out what's happening here. So he starts getting involved, and now this is still in his dream, in the subconscious, but he starts identifying and becomes involved with them, right? Thus, the projection of impressions which lay dormant in the subconsciousness of man makes man play the role of the hero or the creator in his drama of his dreams. So he becomes the key roles in the dream. Because this man in this dream state has only just stirred from his sound sleep and has just attained the semi-conscious state, picture this man experiencing the dreams as one who is starting now to open his eyes very, very slightly. Okay, so the same expression that was used in the beginning of the paragraph. The beginning of the opening of the eyes resembles the advent of the first trace of consciousness as subconsciousness. Now, this is interesting. The first trace of consciousness as subconsciousness manifested in man. Okay. So I will pause here. Any comments? All good till now. Okay. Now let's see what happens in the divine state. While visualizing this state of man as a parallel, picture likewise the state of God in which he has just stirred from his original divine sound sleep state. So this is state 2, which is after beyond. God now only begins to experience the divine dream state or the creator state as soon as the first most finite impression of the nothingness is projected through the divine subconsciousness of God. So, second stage is is the appearance of the Vim and the Om point. Now, let's see. let's just mark out the keywords. This will help us when we reread this. Why I'm marking these keywords is at least I think when we reread this, it will register more easily. So help me if I'm missing some words, right? So this is the most finite impression. In this case, it is most finite impression. In the previous case, it is dormant impressions because it's a nightly ritual, right?
And also you can mark out divine dream state.
Yes, thank you. Firstly, from his divine brain state. Correct. Impression of the nothingness is projected. Now, here he says divine subconsciousness. So, like you have the consciousness or subconsciousness of man, which got stirred, and then we see the dream through that, there is also the divine subconsciousness of God. Okay, now let's continue. Both of these, that is, the nothingness and the divine subconsciousness of God, were latent as of big nothing in the original state of God as the everything. God, now in the initial stage of the divine semi-conscious state, begins to identify himself with the creatures of his own creation. So, just like he became the hero or the actor as man in his dreams and identified with the semi subtle forms in his dream, God begins to identify himself with the creatures of his own creation. Again, in brackets, that is his own divine dream, through the infinite divine subconsciousness, which just begins to project the creation. That is, impressions of the nothingness. Much better, clearer, I guess, from last week. So I'm glad we reread it. Let's continue. Third stage.
No, Jay Baba.
Which,
Hello.
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Can
Come
you
on.
can you go back? Can you go back to the last para, please?
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, which he just second line, which he has just stirred from his most original divine sound sleep state. Okay, I think what happens in God Speaks is at different times, Baba uses different ways of explaining the same concept, you know. So you have the most original whim, right? MOW, or it's called the first initial urge. So I think we need to set up a table which the same concept is given different terminologies. So his original divine sound sleep state is basically, you know, when we talk about the state one of God, which is the beyond state of God, which is called the most original beyond state of God. And the second state is called original beyond state of God. You know, when you come to the supplement,
Correct.
you will read that.
Correct.
The
Correct.
second thing is the first most finite impression is fine of the nothingness is projected through the divine subconsciousness of God. Both of these, the nothingness and the divine subconsciousness of God, were latent as of real nothing in the original state of God as the real everything.
Yes.
Because when you come to the supplement again, when
Correct.
he's explaining nothing and everything, there are four aspects. One is the real everything, then comes the real nothing, then comes false nothing, then comes false everything. So the all these three, real nothing, false nothing, I think that is what he's making it as one word as nothing, I believe. But because I read about the real nothing and false nothing, then from this comes the false everything, right? So
Correct.
just a note, nothing else. So we can actually connect that to the supplement and see if we can read that part, if you don't mind.
Yeah, maybe after we finish the stages.
ठीक है.
Because I understand. Yeah, I think because the flow will be better if we finish the stages now. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Let's continue with the third stage. But good point. And I agree with you. It can end up being pretty confusing, but it's very pertinent and important that we recognize these differences. Most original whim, uh, real nothing, false nothing, real everything, nothingness. All of these are very, very important terms that one needs to have an unambiguous understanding so that we are able to relate to everything Baba says. Right?
In
Anyway,
fact, I have a suggestion. Um, all of us can look at these, whatever the stages that we are going to discuss, 10 stages or whatever, I don't know, in a
7.
tabular
Yeah.
form, so that we can understand the different semi-conscious state,
Yes.
subconsciousness, blah, blah, blah. I think in a tabular form, it will be much easily visualized and understood the way we had done for action, inaction, and all those kind of
Yeah.
things,
Yeah. Yeah.
something like a graphical table
Yes.
type of thing, like a flow chart,
Yes. Yes.
So if
Yes.
everyone can contribute on that, that'll be great. Jai Baba.
In fact, maybe you missed it. I was requesting that yesterday. So I think the variables and the axis are there is the state of man and the state of God, and the states rather in these 7, and there are 7 transitions, and then like Kama said, the state of the consciousness, the experiences that one has, that either God or the man, right? So the nightly or the big dream or the small dream, right? So anyway, I think that's homework that has to
Jai
be done.
Baba, Jai Baba, I just also want to point out a cross reference of the stages of sleep mentioned
In
in Listen.
Listen Humanity. Yes,
That
yes.
is more simpler. This is more elaborate, but it has got a correlation.
Yes. So let's go through this. Then we'll go through supplement and or Listen Humanity, depending on what the group feels. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Fair.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So let's go to third stage. Third stage. Visualize the third state of the man as still asleep. So he is still asleep, but with half open eyes. Now it is not very, very slightly open, but it is half open. Uh, because a man in this state is now completely, because a man in this state now completely experiences the semi-conscious state. So the semi-conscious state was experienced not in full in stage 2. Here it is fully experienced in state 3. In order to picture this complete semi-conscious state of the still sleeping man, continue to visualize him with eyes very, very slightly open. Now, this is confusing because that on top it says half open. Now it is very, very slightly open, representing the beginning of the semi-conscious state. In this state, as said above, he starts to experience dreams due to the false, illusory illusory impressions of the nothingness which were collected subconsciously and are now ejected through the projection of the subconsciousness, giving rise to the beginning of the dream state of man. So, this is the beginning of the dream state of man. Okay. So, let's read this line again slowly. In this state, as said above, he starts to experience dreams due to the false illusory impressions of the nothingness which were collected subconsciously are now ejected out through the projection of the subconsciousness, giving rise to the beginning of the dream state of man. Okay. So the experiences that came out of the big nothing in the dream, in the semi-conscious state or the subconscious state, which started in stage 2, are now ejected out through the projection of subconscious, giving rise to the beginning of the dream state of man. Continuing, but as the dreams continue and as they gather momentum due to the intensity of the projection of multifarious and varied dormant impressions through the subconsciousness of the man, he gets more and more involved subconsciously. This is still in the dream. As a result, he now firmly associates himself with the creatures of his own creation in the dreams, and he is completely in the semi-conscious state. So now there he is partly in the semi-conscious state. Here he is completely in the semi-conscious state. This semi-conscious state of the man represents that state which is neither the complete sound sleep state without consciousness, nor the complete awake state with full consciousness. This state, so to speak, is the semi-awake state. Okay, so it is between wakeful and between sleep. Now, visualize this third state of the man as the state of semi-consciousness represented by half-opened eyes, experiencing the dreams more forcefully and more intently. So I think the summary is what starts as association with the heroes and the actors in the dreams, enabled by the impressions which were dormant, now become more pronounced and more intensive, and his association in the dream becomes more involved. Correct? And this is exactly in between awake and sleep state. That's third stage from a man perspective. Now let's go to third stage from a God perspective. While visualizing the state of the man, picture as a parallel the state of God in the divine dream state, where God is experiencing a semi-conscious state. So it's not subconscious, it's now divine semi-conscious state. At this stage, God, as the creator of creation, experiences the creator state through the infinite divine semi-conscious state. Okay? Infinite divine conscious state, divine semi-conscious state. Here, the infinite divine subconsciousness intensively projecting. So again, here the intensity increases, intensively projecting creation into being, continually affirms God's identification with the creatures of his own creation. This gives rise to infinite experiences of a more forceful nature in the divine dream of God. So, infinite experiences of a more forceful nature in the divine dream of God. So now it's clearly divine dream of God, when God actually finds himself as the creatures of his creation. Now, keep note that he has used the word creatures of his creation. Next stage, you will realize why it's creatures here and not something else. Okay. Any thoughts before we go to fourth?
Yeah, Jai Baba.
Yeah.
What comes to my mind is if we extrapolate this last paragraph to the most original whim of God, which itself is the divine dream of God, in that whim, which is happening in the divine dream, that whim is now projecting out what we call as the Om point, from which all these drop souls from the infinite unconsciousness starts to manifest, which is the analogy to the last line, where God actually finds himself as the creatures of his creation, where God becomes the ocean, Paramatma, and the creatures of his creation, the God, the Paramatma, over soul, ocean, and creatures of his creation are the drop souls or the raindrop from the ocean, which we call as Atmas, Jivatmas. or actually, Jivatmas, drop souls. So that's my insight, Jai Baba.
Yeah, correct. Well said. The matrix now gets more complex. Let's go to the fourth stage. The so it, the switch that we have to do when we are going from stage to stage is again at two levels each time, and that's where it gets a little confusing because the first level is inside and subsumed into the second. The nightly ritual of the man's dream is happening as the big dream is also happening. The big dream is happening all the time, but in that big dream, the man is doing this nightly dream. Anyway, that's for some. I mean, for us to continue thinking even after the call. But I'm just uh, planting that so that it creates some thoughts in your mind. Fourth stage. Visualize the fourth state of the man as that in which he is still asleep. So he is still asleep, but trying to gradually open wider his already half opened eyes in accordance with the greater and greater intensity of the projection of more and more impressions through the subconsciousness of the man still in his dream state. Here, the man is not only in a semi conscious state, but is verging on becoming fully conscious and is about to realize his awake state. So, in the previous stage, third stage, Baba says, man, the man is in between awake and sleep. Here he's saying, verging on being fully conscious and is about to realize this awake state. Now, let's go to what happens to the God. Now, paralleling this, picture also the state of God in the fourth stage of his divine dream state. Compare the fourth state of the man in the semi-conscious state with a very critical stage in the dream state of God. Okay, Baba says, very critical stage. Here, the projection of infinite impressions to the infinite divine subconsciousness of God is so intensified in the course of the cosmic evolution of the consciousness of God that this projection is about to be so completely fixed or so perfectly focused onto the infinity of nothingness as to identify God with his own most perfect image in his divine dream of creation. Thus, at this stage in the divine dream state, God the Creator is about to identify himself with a human form after innumerable identifications with all and everything that is in his creation, including inanimate and animate objects. So, this is where I said, previous stage in the dream, God was identifying with creatures. Now, I just said part that, I mean, keep your eyes out. So now you see that it's from creatures, it's moved to human in the fourth stage. That is, consciousness has reached peak. God, in the divine infinite semi-conscious state, is now nearing the verge of gaining full consciousness concurrently with his identification with the human form. Now let's slowly go line by line and see what all we see here. So here, projection of infinite impressions through the infinite divine subconsciousness now is so intensified that the cosmic evolution identify his own perfect image in his divine dream of God creation, right? So this is identification as human. So the fourth stage is for the God is only identification with human as the most important part. So I will identify this as well here. And God in his divine, infinite, semi-conscious state So this is divine infinite semi-conscious state is now nearing the verge of gaining full consciousness concurrently with his identification with human form. So from a journey perspective, should we say in the God's dream, in the big dream, is this the state of reincarnation and probably the beginning of involution? Because I know this will get covered in fifth stage, but I'm just thinking
No,
so that we,
no.
Jay Baba
It,
Karthik can also
yeah,
underline inanimate and animate objects. I mean, there's that innumerable identification with all and everything that is in his creation, including inanimate and
no,
animate
but
objects.
oh ho gaya. So I didn't do that because now he is identifying with a human form. In the prior one, he was doing inanimate and animate objects. So if you
Okay.
read that whole line again, thus at this stage in the divine dream state, God the Creator is about to identify himself with a human form after innumerable identifications with all and everything that is in his creation, including inanimate and animate objects. So, oh, previous stage, mein.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
Jay Baba.
yeah, Kama.
Inanimate, inanimate object also includes human being, first of all. Go
Uh,
above, like, go to
yeah,
the, don't go to the fifth stage. Can you go up again, the full
yeah,
paragraph?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So here the projection of infinite impressions, and then in the course of the cosmic evolution of the consciousness of God, which is basically going through all the different kingdoms. So starting from the second stage right up to this stage, fourth stage, you're seeing the whole evolution of consciousness through different kingdoms. And this one is what I call as the threshold level, because it says that um, it he's identifying with the human form, now nearing the verge of gaining full consciousness concurrently with his identification with human form. So the question is, has on the fifth, thus at this stage in the divine dream state, God the Creator is about to identify himself with a human form, which means uh, he has not yet identified. Like it's almost like at the border, right?
It's the imminent. Oh, yeah, correct.
Right. In God Speaks, if you remember, the first stage of involution is actually the threshold level between the gross sphere and the subtle sphere. And the fourth plane of existence, the fourth sphere, is also the fourth sphere of involution, is also the threshold between the subtle plane and the mental plane. So this particular fourth stage is actually the border level where he is not, he's on the verge of identification with the human form. It's almost like you're seeing yourself, okay, I'm going to become that, but you have not become that, like you're going to cross that fence, going to the other side of
Mm.
the fence. So that's what comes to me, that nearing the verge of gaining full consciousness concurrently with his identification with human form, because they go hand in hand. According to God Speaks, once the drop soul takes the first human form, consciousness has become full and complete, right? Which
Yes,
is called
yes.
gaining full consciousness, or what you call Maha Chaitanya, technically super consciousness. So I'll leave it at that now. Jai Baba.
So, Ashok ji, I correct myself because good subtle point that Kama pointed out. So, over the course of fourth stage, through identifications with all and everything in his creation, including inanimate and animate objects, he is about to identify himself. So, इस stage में ही हो रहा है. So I am underlining, as you suggested, inanimate and inanimate, animate and inanimate, like you suggested. Because towards the end of this stage is when, after going through the kingdoms, the identification with the human form actually happens.
Yes.
So the human
Yeah.
form is a subset of the animate object or kingdom.
Agreed.
Animate is
But
basically something which reproduces, which has a mind or whatever that is. Because today morning only I was, I had sent a link about the word conscious and unconsciousness. Similarly, you can do a chat GPT on what is the difference and similarity between animate and inanimate objects. Because I was going through a TikTok or whatever, Instagram, where the guy was talking about sentient beings. And I wrote a comment on it, which I will send it to you. And I was doing some research on that because the word animate and inanimate, I was actually researching on that, Jay Baba.
again, just as a thought, maybe from a Baba perspective, when he's saying inanimate and animate, uh, animate does not include human. That's my assumption, but I may be wrong. But in general
No, no.
parlance, I agree with you.
Animate technical meaning itself is, starting from the plant kingdom, where you have something live that reproduces. Rock is inanimate, right? It
Yes.
can't reproduce itself, whereas a plant can replicate. It has life force. But the controversy has been about the concept of consciousness, which we all know that this whole universe, without consciousness, this whole universe won't exist without the universal consciousness. But that is where the scientists and everybody is, still conflicted about, Eva.
Correct. That's because they are not getting the key element, which is the independent variable, which is the dependent variable. Independent variable is consciousness. That's what's driving the whole
Right.
damn thing. Anyway,
Matter
uh,
comes out of consciousness. Yes, correct.
exactly, exactly. So once they figure that out, they will be in peace. I mean, they'll not be
Just
in peace. They'll be in pieces like us, struggling.
so
Yeah, Mama.
before you go to the fifth stage, show the
Sure,
fourth stage, last
sure,
paragraph.
sure.
I have a very basic question here. When we compare these, we are comparing here the human stage and the God stage developments in the different
Yes,
stages. In
correct.
the human stage, the projection of impressions is very well understood. We have impressions which project out. But what is this projection of infinite impression of the God state?
Okay. Again, I'll try to explain what I have understood. So, what starts in the previous stage as home point and just the basic impression, using the triune nature of God, which is infinite power, infinite knowledge, and infinite bliss, that goes on expanding. And that's why he uses the word infinite divine subconsciousness and projection of infinite impressions. So, from that singular point, or the singular impression, or the singular question, or the most original whim, the 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 logic or the explanation or the reason for it expanding is the true nature of God, which is infinite bliss, infinite power, infinite knowledge, and that expresses through increasing impressions. Does that
Oh,
make
the
sense?
idea of impressions as we understand right now is that
Mhm.
we had a previous experience and that makes an impression. And outcome of that impression is expressed as what next or how best or how worst on that. So
Correct.
here, if that is the projection, then what is that infinite impression of the God states? Had he impressions earlier? Had he had cycles like this? And those impressions are coming out now. Oh, this leads to a lot of confusing ideas.
Jay Baba, I can try to explain that. See,
Please.
technically, everything is happening in the divine dream state. Okay. It's like a baby which is in the womb. and we know that the baby is reincarnated. We are talking about a human baby, but the impressions of its past lives are latent. It only gets manifested when it's 7 or 8 years old, according to what we have read. But let's go back to the projection of infinite impressions through the infinite divine subconsciousness of God. So imagine Paramatma, when you take as the ocean has got infinite number of molecules of water. So we have these infinite drop souls, and each drop soul is unique because its consciousness is going through evolution, gaining impressions. All of the impressions then then get projected into a particular form so that those impressions can be experienced again in the higher form, basically so that consciousness can evolve, go higher and higher. So technically what we are looking here is the infinite impressions, or what we call as the organic natural impressions during evolution, which we call as winding sanskaras, right? And then once you reach the human form, all these sanskaras, winding sanskaras, organic sanskaras, or natural sanskaras, which have accumulated, now has to be manifested and experienced in the human form as a human being, which we call as spending sanskaras, where we are going to create newer sanskaras, which we call as inorganic, unnatural human sanskaras, till we reach a tipping point where you now have to unwind these sanskaras, right? So, up till the human form, you can't do anything. It is programmed based on each soul's program, the divine will, during the most original will. Each drop soul is going through its own evolution. So, the winding sanskaras is mechanical. You can't do anything about it. And even when you come in the human form, having an animal instinct, and you're going through the caveman, agriculturist and whatever, and you're spending sanskaras, and then you're going through the unwinding part. So ultimately, it's a zero sum game, and all this is happening like a Russian doll. Like you have four different pots which are of different volumes, and you can put it within each other. So the most outer pot is the Paramatma, the God in his divine dream state. Within that pot, there are these multiple pots which we call drop souls, going through different kingdoms. And even within the human form, as we know, in 24 hours, we are going through three different states of consciousness which are mutually exclusive, but they are interconnected, which is a paradox. So on the waking state, we are consciously or unconsciously spending impressions. Then in the sleeping dream state, as we just read, those impressions which we can't manifest in the waking state then get manifested in your dream state, which we call the sleeping dream state. And then the other beautiful state is the sound sleep state, where you are actually experiencing the divine absolute vacuum state, but you are unconscious of it. So that is why everything that is happening is in the divine dream. And in the supplement to God Speaks, there is one line where Baba says nothing is happening technically. So we have to look at the big picture. But within the big picture, there are a lot of these micro, what we call like a multiverse going on. Like, so one shouldn't get too involved in these impressions and think about, whether, yes, Baba said there have been billions of avatars and billions of universes, but it's all happening in the divine dream state of God. Jai Baba.
Okay, I think thanks for that overview, but I think I understand Mama's question is a little different. Mama's question is what is there a link? Are there multiple divine dreams? So he's nudging towards Mahapralaya. I think.
Okay.
Is that correct?
That's the one aspect. What as Kama explained now is the human experience here projected in two different paragraphs, no? Human and God experience, things like that. So the first paragraph refers to a single drop soul's experience.
Correct.
Whereas as the Kama explained now, can it be said as a projection of the whole all drop souls in the ocean taken together is the projection of infinite impressions?
Correct. That's the
Yes,
divine dream.
well said.
The big
Correct.
dream. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Mamaji, Mamaji and others, to make it simpler into a mathematical mind, we have the universal set. And as you said, we are discussing from the human form as well as the God form. So both are part of the universal set. And also this infinite uh, infinite conscious state and infinite uh, unconscious state. So it's both are all parts and pieces of the universal, the universal. Uh, what you call that? The universal, the totality of the universal set. In that there are subsets. I'm putting it in a Venn diagram sort of a thing, but that can make us understand these various parts and pieces.
Yeah. I think we also need in the Venn diagram a fourth dimension because there's no time. Time has to be there in Venn diagram. So, I agree with the Venn diagram, universal set of divine dream impressions, and then the individual set is the circles or whatever symbology you use inside the Venn diagram. But then there's another dimension, which is the complicated matrix dimension, which is the time, because time also is there, and it's all
Yes,
happening at the same time.
Jai Baba,
and
Yeah,
also add that
uh,
the universal subset can be equated to the ocean.
correct.
okay.
I mean, just
Jai Baba, I'll give another analogy because Mamaji, because he's a medical doctor, the analogy that I've always tried to think of is the human being. Take a individual human being which has billions of cells. Cells make tissues, and tissues makes organs which have different functions. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe all the cells are similar, and what is happening within each cell probably the constituents of each cell are similar, but when they all form together to become tissues and then become organs, they all do different functions. So similarly, I think this whole cosmos universe, which we are talking about, the divine dream state of God, it's almost like this human form can be used as as God Paramatma, and within it all these different cells within the human form is all the different happenings that is going on, the different kingdoms and so on and so forth. So I would like to ask Mamaji whether we can look at that analogy of the cells in the human being as drop souls.
That's a nice expression. Makes me think a bit on that. Probably it is so. Say a liver cell has a particular function and it can do only that and nothing else. Similarly, a nervous cell has some structure and a functionality which it cannot cross over and do something else for another cell. But taken together in a whole being, they have a synchronized function which is required for the functionality of the whole being as such. So that sort of a symbiotic activity projects one individual out of so many millions of cells, and each variety of cell being different in its own way. So that's a complex projection where the whole individual functions as a human being, but with multiple different characteristics in each of the cells or organs, in the organs. So that's a complex way of understanding human being as such. Each of these cells has 23 genes, the chromosomes, similar genes, but there is difference between them. So how do they come together, function uh, as a individual or as a human character is a unique experience to be understood. So we can compare this to the whole cosmos. So whole cosmos is made up of so many different elements, different unusual, say, elements, but still they have a functionality of a single cosmos. That is how life goes on. So what is the central or cardinal force that makes them do all this? That is God. That's how I understand.
It's
Eva.
universal consciousness, if you take that analogy
Yes.
further. Yeah.
That
Yeah,
life
Kama.
force. So the question I still want to understand. So, doctor, the cell, the fundamental cell in a liver and the fundamental individual cell in a lung or heart or whatever, are they different?
So they're different functionally. So what aspect of the 23 chromosomes with millions of genes in them is functional at in those particular cells taken from a liver or a nerve cell or some other cell is different. But
Okay.
when we analyze and then find out, they all have the same capability of doing everything. So, but the expression that they give out is different depending on from where they are originating and what set of activity they are destined to do.
Isn't it a permutation combination of different cells, just like when you take the fundamental constituents of matter? For example, we know if we take the periodic table, hydrogen atomic number 1, helium atomic number 2, which is basically constituents of protons and electrons.
Yes.
But all of these different elements in the periodic table are proton, electron, neutron, which is now broken down into quarks, right? So I was trying to understand that if you go deeper into the cell aspect, there is some common element which puts them together, correct?
Yes. What is that force which puts them together and also make individual cells to function in a different way compared to another cell?
Right. Okay.
So there
Got it.
is a force which makes them do that.
So
That is
there is a universal life force which probably, like in yoga we have something called prana, apana, there are 6 or 7
yes,
different types
yes.
of life forces. So but they all come with the one universal force, which again reminds me of the gut theory, the grand unified theory, which is trying to bring all the 4 forces together: the strong nuclear force, weak nuclear force, electromagnetic force, and gravitational force. 3 of the forces have already been combined together. Only challenge remaining is how to combine gravitational force with quantum. That is all the other 3 forces, because the other 3 forces are the subatomic part, whereas the gravity is part of the macro world. The what do you call the macro universe, and that is in the subatomic aspect. So, okay, Jay Baba, thanks.
Okay.
Okay,
I think
I
we are
can
running away with
for those,
analogies.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
for those who are a bit confused with what we talked now, I'll give you one example. Say, liver cell is destined to be a liver cell till the end. Similarly, some other spleen cell is destined to be a spleen cell till the end. So now extrapolate this with cancer. So these cells, one of the cells suddenly becomes, say, different. what forces that to become different is we are not able to understand. But that acts differently, so it functionality changes, its structure changes, and it begets similar new cells. That is cancer. So there in the liver, it may act as something different, not the functionality of the liver. And what makes it do that, we are unable to understand as of now. So this is how we, so in the if you extrapolate this with the, say, the whole structure of the human body, each human person acts in a very say destined and defined way. But if there is a change in one cell and that leads to some other awkward activity, then that leads to cancer. So what makes this happen? That is not clear. So I hope the example of cancer makes clear that tissue cells have a structure and functionality very rigid. They cannot be something else normally. But unusually, they can become like whatever they are not destined to be. So that is cancer. I hope this makes people understand at least a few points about appearance of cancer.
I have another question.
More confused.
Mama, one second. One more question. I want to ask Mama, during the conception of before a baby is born, the sperm and the egg, is it a unicellular, one cell?
Pluripotent unicellular, one cell by the fusion of two cells.
Okay. So that keeps dividing.
Yes.
So
as it divides, gradually one set of these cells become skin, the other set becomes bone, other set becomes some other organ, and each one expresses new functionality. I use the term expression because genes in every cell have the capability of functioning in the same way as any other cell. But they are destined to function only one way. That is known as the organ or the tissue of a particular organ in the human body or any living organism.
Okay.
We are digressing. Okay.
Yeah, I think we have run away a little bit deep into the analogy, but I'm sure it will be useful. I was just thinking
But
of
my central question remains that infinite divine impression means what, and does it lead to what is the Vedantic expression of Pralaya? So this we will keep it in the back of our mind. Continue.
Okay, so I understood your question correctly, and I think that's what it is. It is the divine dreams pause and re-emergence is Mahapralaya. But let's research and be convinced on that. Meanwhile, I was just thinking on the lighter vein before we get back to fifth stage. So the cancer cell is actually using free will. That's the problem. Till it doesn't use free will, everything was hunky dory, right? The liver was acting as liver, but then once it starts using free will, it causes problem for the whole macro. Anyway, that's just on a lighter vein. Yeah.
That free will is also not totally free will, but it is to begin with, they have a free will to do whatever they want. And once they start producing another type of cell, they get tuned to be that itself. So that's why cancers remain as a particular cancer. They don't say jump over and produce all different types of cancers or things like that.
Correct.
So free will, say ordained
is not truly free.
Not truly free. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, let's continue. Back to the stages. We finished 4 stages. Now we are getting to the 5th stage. We start with the man. 5th stage. Visualize the 5th stage, 5th state of the man as being still asleep, but with eyes now almost open. The man in this state is still in the semi-conscious or semi-awake state, experiencing the dreams at their height in their final stage. Where did we leave him in the last one? He was getting more and more intensively involved in the creatures and as the heroes and the actors in his dream. So here he's experiencing the dreams at their height in their final stage, in which impressions are projected through his subconsciousness with the greatest intensity. The zenith is reached both by the intensified projection of the impressions in much less hazy forms or in greater degree of realism and by relevant dreams which are dreamt in a greater degree of clarity in their right stage. This is the stage in dreams when the subsubtle forms of nothingness have reached their zenith and appear more clearly. The dreams at their height now must stop because the zenith reached by the projections of impressions through the subconsciousness of the man is at this point sufficient to excite and urge the emergence or manifestation of full consciousness at any moment. This state of the man, almost fully conscious, may therefore be pictured as a man with his eyes almost wide open though still asleep. This is the stage reached a split second before the man has aroused from his dream state to become wide awake. This is the completely matured, semi-conscious state of subconsciousness. Now, let's go back and do our marking, right? So here, he is still asleep, okay? But with eyes now almost open. Okay? And that's a theme that's repeated multiple times. The man in this state is still in the semi-conscious or semi-awake state, experiencing dreams in their height, in their final stage. So the key word here is final stage. And then you see other words like zenith multiple times, right? In which the impressions are projected through his subconsciousness with greatest intensity. The zenith is reached both in the intensified zenith is reached both by intensified projection of the impressions in much hazy forms or in greater degree of realism and by relevant dreams which are dreamt in a greater degree of clarity in their right stage. So I'll think these two are deserving and in their right stage. This is the stage in the dreams where the subsubtle forms of nothingness have reached their zenith and appear more clearly. Same thing. The dreams at their height now must stop because this is interesting. So they reach a point where they must stop because the zenith reached by the projections of impressions through the subconsciousness of the man is at this point sufficient to excite and urge the emergence of manifestation of full consciousness. So the because the dreams and the impressions and the identification with those semi-subtle forms, I mean those subtle forms in the dream, has reached the zenith. It's pushing you to wake up. The state of the man, now almost fully conscious, may therefore be pictured with a man with his eyes almost wide open, though still asleep. Right? So, though still asleep. This is the stage reached a split second before waking up. Right? So, that's also makes sense. Split second before waking up. This is the completely matured semi-conscious state of subconsciousness. So in the previous one, it is partial semi-consciousness of the subconsciousness. Here it is completely matured semi-consciousness of the subconsciousness. So now let's get to stage 5 of God, right? While visualizing the fifth state of the man, side by side with it, picture that state of God in his divine dream state, where God is experiencing the completely matured state of the divine, infinite, semi-conscious state, and is almost about to gain full consciousness. At its zenith, the intensity of the projection of infinite impressions through the divine, infinite subconsciousness of God has almost ceased to identify God semi-consciously with the last of the creatures in the cosmic evolution of creation and forms. With divine, infinite subconsciousness, God is in his divine, infinite semi-conscious state, which, when almost matured, identified God with infinite impressions of animal forms. But now, in the fifth stage of the divine dream state, where God is in the completely matured, divine, infinite semi-conscious state, God can no longer be made to identify with impressions of animal forms, even though they are intensively and infinitely projected through his divine, infinite subconsciousness. At this point, a stage is reached in the divine dream state, wherein, with the projection to infinity of impressions projected infinitely through the divine, infinite subconsciousness of God at its zenith, this infinite projection has almost identified God with a human form, and God is almost fully conscious. What do you make of this? There is a little bit of confusion now, because in the previous one, we saw that, let's go back to state 4 for God. So state 4 for God, thus at this stage in the divine dream state, God the Creator is about to identify himself. So actually, it's not happening in fourth stage at all. It's imminent, but does not happen here. He's still only identifying with animals. Here, if you come to the fifth stage, Baba says, at this point, the stage is reached in the divine dream state, wherein, with the projection to infinity of impressions projected infinitely through the divine infinite subconsciousness of God, being at its zenith, this infinite projection has almost identified God with a human form, and God is almost fully conscious. So even here, it's not saying that he's identifying with a human form, but it's almost identifying with a human form. Any thoughts and reactions?
Yep.
And
Yeah, Baba, I think that the fifth stage, fourth stage is like below 50% identification, and fifth stage is greater than 50%. Like you can say maybe even 50 to or 75% or whatever. But in both cases, there is an identification, but the intensity of it is less in the fourth stage compared to the fifth stage, it seems. Yeah.
that's what it looks like. So you're
So many
almost,
semantics out here. Yeah.
yeah, it's imminent, but not done. It's almost there, right? So I think this is pretty confusing, I would say, from a semantics perspective, right? So
We
here
are
again,
almost in
it's
focus. I call it, we are almost in so-called virgin territory,
yes, with divine infinite subconsciousness, God in his divine infinite semi-conscious state, when almost matured, identified God with infinite impressions of, this is still happening. But now he's moving from there. Now in the fifth stage, where God is in completely matured, divine, infinite, semi-conscious state, God can no longer be made to identify with impressions of animal forms, even though they are intensively and infinitely projected through his divine, infinite subconsciousness. At this point, a stage is reached. At this point, a stage is reached in the divine dream state, wherein, with the projection to infinity of impressions projected infinitely through the divine, infinite subconsciousness of God, being at its zenith, this infinite projection has almost, so still not done, binary state of identification is not done, but almost. Okay. And so full consciousness in the divine, when he becomes fully conscious, he identifies with God in the divine dream state. Okay, let's continue to sixth stage if there are no questions. Sixth stage. Visualize the sixth state of the man as having completely awakened from his sleep and as having his eyes completely wide open. In this state, the man is no longer in the semi-conscious state, dreaming the dreams which were nothing but the hazy and faint projection of the dormant impressions of nothingness, which were stored in the subconsciousness of the man and realized through his subconsciousness in subsubtle forms of nothingness. This is the state. This is the stage in the state of the man where he has just awakened completely, but albeit he is fully conscious, he is not conscious of his biggest self as yet. The man is no longer in his sound sleep and semi-conscious states. With full consciousness gained, is pictured now with wide open eyes. So he's completely awake. This means the end of the dream or the end of the false state of man, where he experienced the latent or dormant big nothing, big and nothing, manifested in its raw state as big and nothingness in the shape of hazy and faint subsubtle forms. The man now, in the awake state, no longer experiences or sees the nothingness as some hazy or faint as he used to see it in his dream state. With his eyes just opened wide and fully, he is dazed and stares vacantly at things that now confront his sight more realistically. The man now observes things that confront his sight as if he were seeing the ripe, the clear, and the fully developed forms of the same nothingness that he saw in his dream as the raw, hazy, and faint. In this state, the man sees, as it were, yet another dream, but he sees it much more realistically than the dream from which he awakened a split second before. So he has woken from the dream. He is now seeing the things around him in clear way, but he is actually dealing with another dream because it's the dream powered by his impressions, which now come about in his full consciousness state. Now, from a individual man's standpoint, it's the point where he has completely woken up. Right? Now let's go back and slowly reread this and understand a little better. So first thing is it's completely awakened, right? Completely awakened, and eyes are completely wide open, right? He's no longer in the semi-conscious state, okay? But which dominant impression which was stored in the subconscious is realized through his subconscious. Okay, this is the stage in the state of the man where he has just awakened completely, but albeit he's fully conscious, Okay. He is not conscious of his self now. So here, this is a suggestion that he is uh, uh, awake, but he is not God realized, right? The man is no longer in his sound sleep and semi-conscious states, and with full consciousness gain, is pictured now with wide open eyes. That's already, this is again a repetition. Okay. This means the end of the dream, okay, or the end of the false state of man, where he experienced the latent, or so I'll just say end of false state of man, okay, where he experienced the latent or dormant nothing manifested in its raw state as nothingness in the shape of hazy and faint subsubtle forms. In the dream state, he was identifying with those hazy and subsubtle forms. The man now in the awake state no longer experiences the or sees the nothingness as something hazy or faint as he used to see it in the dream state. With his eyes just opened wide and fully, he is dazed and stares vacantly. Now, this is new, okay? At things that confront his sight more realistically. The man now observes things that confront his sight as if he were seeing the right, the clear, and fully developed forms of the same nothingness that he saw in his dream as raw, hazy, and faint. Key thing is, in this state, the man sees as it were yet another dream, but he sees it much more realistically than the dream from which he awakened a split second before. I'll pause here. Any comments? A bit confusing because from the dream state, he has completely opened his eyes. But Baba says he's also getting into seeing everything around him with haziness. It is sight, it is with full consciousness, but it's raw, hazy, and faint. And that's where he says it's as if it was yet another dream, right?
Uh,
So yeah,
no, yet another dream. Is it his, say, opening out to reasoning, uh, thinking about what is around him, then inquiring uh, from where did I come, what is my goal, all these sort of, say, awakening questions and then finding answers to them. That is the next phase, is it? That is the next dream.
that's a good point. So basically, you're saying beginning of the path, beginning of involution, beginning jigyasa. So that
Beginning of
make him,
the what is this? Reincarnation, and maybe that is the process, or involution also included.
yeah. Once you start getting the questions, you're starting that. Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway,
I think we
let's.
have to read the different stages, then we can come to a conclusion. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
I
that
think
summarized,
read
what
all the.
those different stages may be
Yeah,
called.
correct.
Let's finish the stages. Yeah.
As a note to all of us, I think the next time we read God Speaks and this section, what we should do to lessen the confusion probably is see the man state in the seven stages separately, read it and understand it, then get to the God state separately, seven. So, though it is appearing twice in each stage, maybe reading all the man states once in sequence and then going through the God states in sequence will help the learning process. But anyway, the table is a must. The visualization or table or whatever we call it, we have to do some work. Let's do that. Let me go to the next paragraph. How much time do we have?
Can we finish 6 stages?
I doubt it.
No, I think we can.
No, I don't want to rush it. And
Yes, yes.
Yeah, it's already 9 now. So I think we will stop here. Uh, and I would urge everybody to try to take up that homework seriously. And I would also urge you to go and read all the way up to the seventh stage, maybe in the approach that I suggested, if that helps some of you, where you take up the man's dream 1 through 7, then take up the God's dream 1 through 7, right? And then we will exchange notes. Please find an hour or two this week to do this. I will surely try to do that from my side, but I'm requesting all of you as well. And anything that you find or put together as notes, even if it's written on paper, just scan and share it so that we are able to learn from each other. That's the whole objective of our journey.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Let's stop at this stage and everybody have a very good Sunday and the week ahead. Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai.
Avatar Baba ki jai.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Jai Baba. Jai Baba.
Yeah. Jai Baba.